Hello everyone, welcome to iFashi. In today's tutorial, we will be teaching us how to make this beautiful crop blazer jacket. This is a crop blazer, but with this tutorial, you will also get to learn how to make a full-length blazer with a notched collar. We already posted the tutorial on how to make this beautiful pant trouser that I'm wearing here. Also, the tutorial on how we drafted this blazer has already been posted on the channel. This video contains the sewing tutorial. So if you haven't checked out the drafting tutorial, the link is in the description box. So kindly do well to check it out so that you catch up with where we stopped. So I'll do a little recap on what we already did during the drafting, how we cut on fabric, how we prepped our fabric. I ironed my estay to my fabric before placing my pattern paper on top to cut out. Also, for the sewing allowance, kindly use sewing allowance that you are comfortable working with. If you're okay working with 1 inch, take 1 inch sewing allowance. For me, for the neck part, I use 0.5. There are some places I don't want the allowance to be too big, but for the sides I have 1 inch seam allowance, as you can see on your screen. So for this center front, I mentioned on the drafting video that you should endeavor to use your main fabric as your lining for that center front, because after sewing, the collar of the lining is what comes to the outer part of your jacket. So also the same thing goes for the collar. You have to make sure you use your main fabric as the lining of your collar as well. And then for the sleeve, I also mentioned that you can use a 2-piece sleeve that we used here, or you use a single sleeve for your blazer jacket sleeve. Whichever works for you is fine. The tutorial is in the description box. So before we started joining these fabrics together, the first thing I did was to mark out my sewing allowance. You might see this as a waste of time, but trust me, this makes your sewing very accurate to avoid fittings and losing and all of that. So I use my pen to first of all mark out the lines at which I'll be joining before I went ahead to start pinning them together. I pinned my center back to my side back, my center front to my side front on both the main fabric and on the lining before we went to the sewing machine to start joining. So the drafting and the pinning is what we did for the first part of this video, which was the drafting video. This part 2, we are going to be joining all of these pieces together to make a beautiful crop blazer jacket. So guys, let's get into the sewing of this jacket. So for this sewing part, the first thing I did was to join all of those parts that we pinned together. Stitch all of them. The center back has been stitched together, the side back has been stitched to the center back. Also, same thing goes for the front. I've stitched the whole part together, side front to center front. So the next thing is to iron out all of these stitches that we just made to give us a neat work. So go ahead and iron and flatten out these seams. And when you're ironing and it gets to the bust part, especially on the front, you endeavor to use your bust ham to iron that part so that you don't flatten that part out. That part contains the bust here, so you're going to use your bust ham to iron that part. After which, we will now take the back and the front and join it together on the sides and on the shoulder. That's the next thing we'll be going to the sewing machine to join. Now first of all, pin it down, pin down the sides, the 2 sides, and then pin the shoulders as well. The shoulder of the front and shoulder of the back pinned together. After pinning down the main fabric, I'll repeat the same thing for the lining, pin them down, and then take it to the sewing machine to stitch them. And I'll be right back to show you guys. After stitching them together, this is what we have. I've also gone ahead to iron out my seams. Please endeavor to always iron whenever you're sewing. It makes your work very, very neat. Don't wait till you finish before you iron, because sometimes it's not every part that you can iron again after sewing. So the next thing we're going to move into now is the collar. We're going to start attaching the collar. Remember the part that we marked out when we were drafting our collar? You're also going to use your marker to mark it out at this point so that they match each other. So I'm going to take the side of the collar that will be stitched. If you want to know, you place your pattern paper on it to get it, and then you place it the midpoint of your collar, place it at that midpoint of your center back. And then the part that you also marked out with our marker, which is the beginning of our lapel notch, right? You're going to also match it with the mark you have on the lapel. So you pin it together, and then there's another part that we marked that matches the shoulder, the joining on the shoulder. So when these 3 points match, you're good to go. So you're also going to repeat the same thing for the second side. Mark the second side, and then take the marked part of your collar, which is the notched part at the beginning. You're going to pin that part together, and then pin down the second marked part that is joined to the joining on the shoulder. When you pin that down, you now arrange every other part and hold it down with a pin. This is how we're going to be stitching it on the sewing machine. I'm also going to do the same thing for my lining as well. Pin them down before you stitch. And now for my lining, I realized I've not made my markings on the main fabric, right? So I introduced my pen and used it to mark it down. You might be wondering, what kind of pen is this that I'm marking on fabric? It's the type of pen that cleans off when you iron. Do not use your marker, the regular marker on your client's fabric or on your clothes. It might not clean. So in order not to have a rough job, endeavor to get this pen so that whatever you mark, when you iron it, it will disappear. So you're going to do the same thing for this lining. Now place the midpoint of your collar to the center back, the joining on the center back, and pin it all the way. If you notice, the first 3 parts I pinned at the marked point, then every other part will align. So make sure those parts are together before you take it to the same machine to stitch. Now this is what we have. I've joined my collar to the bodice. So when you're joining, the bodies have a curve that makes it difficult. So you're going to notch that curve you have on the bodies so that it will be easy for you. Also, you're going to iron out that seam when you finish. This is what we've done so far. I've ironed the neckline that I just joined my collar. So we're going to keep this aside now and start working on our sleeves. So like I mentioned before, I'll be using a 2-piece sleeve, and for this sleeve, it has a back side and the front side. So I'm just using my marker to mark out the back and the front, because you don't want to mistake the front for the back. It will give you problems. So when you watch the drafting video, you understand why we have the back and the front side of this sleeve. It is very important to follow it so that your sleeve will sit perfectly on your shoulder. So after marking it out, I'm going to go ahead to pin the back side of the inner sleeve and the back side of the outer sleeve together, and then I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the front part. I'll pin them together, and as you can see on your screen, the first thing I'm doing is marking out the back and front so that you don't mix them up, both the lining and the main fabric. After doing that, you take the back side, pin it to the back side for the inner and outer sleeve, and then do the same thing for the front side. And when you're pinning, start from the length of the sleeve upwards. So I repeat the same thing for my lining. When you're cutting this sleeve and the lining, make sure the lining is 1 inch shorter than the main fabric. So after pinning and stitching, this is what I've joined it together. The next thing I'm going to do is to iron out my seam. Make this a habit, always iron. At this point that I'm ironing, I realized that if I iron this part, my back and front is going to disappear and it will confuse me. So what I did is I used the normal regular marker to mark only the back part, and make sure it's a marker that will not come out on the front part of your fabric, please. So I just made a point on the back part so that whenever I see this red mark, I know this side goes to the back. So I'll do the same thing for the second sleeve and for the both linings as well before I go ahead and iron, because once I iron, all my writings, so the B and F I wrote with my pen, will clear off and I will not see it again. So for you not to be confused, that's why I did this marker thing. So I'll go ahead and iron all of this now. In order not to waste our time, I'll iron it off camera, and then this is what we have. I've ironed out my seams, all the seams I made on the sleeve, both lining and main fabric. But before I start attaching this sleeve to the main fabric, I'm going to set this sleeve. There's something we call sleeve setting. So when you cut this two-piece sleeve, the outer sleeve comes out bigger than your armhole, and it is cut like that because it's meant to be set. So to set your sleeve, you're going to run a loose stitch on this upper part, the cap side of the bigger outer sleeve. So this loose stitch, we're going to drag it the way we used to stitch for gathers. You drag it, but do not gather it too much because it's not meant to be gathered on your shoulder, right? Just watch closely and see how I'm doing it. I'll drag my sleeve. After dragging, I'll tie it up and then introduce my sleeve ironing board. It is when you iron that all of the gathers that you just made will disappear. So we're going to iron out these gathers using this ironing board. When you place it on it like this, stretch it open so that the gathers will go towards the seam allowance, not on the sleeve itself. So see the way, watch closely to see the way I am pressing it. When you place it like this, open it out and use your steam iron to press it. As you can see, as I'm pressing, all of my pleats are going towards the allowance. They are no longer on the main sleeve itself. So this is how you set your sleeve. With this, your sleeve will sit perfectly on your shoulder. You see that little structure you have on a blazer sleeve. This is how you achieve it. So I'm going to repeat this same thing for the second sleeve, the sleeve setting I mentioned. I'm going to repeat this same sleeve setting on the second sleeve. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin it down on the bodies of our jacket. So if you remember, we marked the part that is going backwards. So when you're pinning, make sure that part goes to the back. The same thing goes for the second sleeve. After dragging my sleeve, I'll iron it out so that my pleats will not be showing on the outside. After ironing, I would pin it down on my shoulder on the bodies and then take it to the sewing machine to stitch. Now we'll set our sleeve. I did the same thing for the lining and the main fabric. This is what we have. See the way it is sitting straight on the shoulders. If you set your sleeve, this is how it comes out. So we're going to go ahead and iron it now and then continue with the rest part of this tutorial. Now the next part we're going to move into is the closing of our collar. Watch closely to see what I'm doing here. You place the lining and the main fabric right sides facing each other and you start pinning. Remember that notched part of our lapel that we marked? You're going to hold it together like this and pin it down. One thing you need to note here, when you're pinning here, make sure all your allowance goes upwards, goes towards the collar. Don't let it go down towards the bodies. So I'm taking my allowance up and then I'll pin it and all the way to the other end before we go to the sewing machine to sew. I'll be taking us through this sewing process of this collar so that we don't miss any parts. So before we do that, I'm going to mark out my seam allowance. Remember when I drafted, my neckline had 0.5 seam allowance that I'll be sewing on. So this is what I'm marking here. So I'll mark it to that point where we have our notch from one end to the other. Make sure you follow the seam allowance that you put. I'm using 0.5 because this allowance here is not meant to be too big. I'm still going to even trim it off when I finish stitching. So we are going to the sewing machine now to start stitching. We will follow this allowance, follow it diligently. When you get to this notched point, make sure your needle is inside, then raise up this part of your machine and then turn the fabric over, then you start stitching. When you get to this point, repeat the same thing. You raise it up and turn your fabric and continue stitching. And when you get to this second side of our notched, the notched part of our lapel, you're going to also do the same thing. Raise your needle. Remember, your allowance goes up. Your allowance is facing the collar. So you stitch it up onto this point, raise your needle again, and then finish up with the collar stitching. When we finish doing this, we're going to go back to the table and then trim out what we have on this point, then turn it over and iron. So guys, this is what we just did. We've stitched this point. The next thing I'm going to do now is to trim off this part. Before you trim, open it out to be sure you did the right thing. So after confirming, I'm just going to give it a good notch. When you're notching, please notch with the tip of your scissors. Don't follow what I'm doing so that you don't go and make mistake. Notch with the tip of your scissors, then cut off every excess fabric you have on this curved part, so that when you flip it open to the right side, you will not have anything disturbing that part, so that it will come out seamless. I'm so sorry, this part I raised my hand too much, more than what the camera could cover while I was trimming this upper part, but I did no magic. Watch closely. I brought it down later so that you see what I did. I just trimmed off the excess allowance I had there. I had no idea my hand was higher than the camera, so I just trimmed it off and also repeated the same notching I did on the other side. When you're notching this part, be very careful so that you don't tear it open, but make sure you notch every part of this place so that when you open it to the right side, nothing is obstructing the curve that you have on this notch part of our lapel. So I'm going to flip it to the right side now and then give it a very good press. After notching, this is what we have. You open it to the right side and then iron it. One thing you need to note when you're ironing, please iron on the lining part, because that's the part that comes out on the outside. Make sure all the lines that you stitch are pushed towards the main fabric part so that the stitch is not on the outside. When you open up your collar, you're not supposed to be seeing any stitches at all. So you open it up like this, place it on your ironing table. Here I'm using my boss ham because I just need it to be on a firm surface, right? So I'm pressing it down. Use your steam iron to give this place a very good iron. I am ironing on the lining part, as you can see, because that's where the focus is. This is the outer part of our collar. So I'm going to do the same thing all the way down from one end of the collar to the other end. When you're ironing this part, make sure the stitched part is pushed towards the inside so that there's no stitches showing on the outside. So if you notice, when I'm ironing the flat part, I place it on my table, but when I'm ironing this curved notch part, because I want it to be neatly ironed, to erase any form of squeezes there, I'm using my bust hand because I need a solid surface. So this is what we have after ironing. You can see that there are no squeezes whatsoever on the collar part. This is because it was properly notched. If yours is not like this, go back and check if you notched it very well. So after doing this now, the next part we're going to turn is the lapel part, which is that collar that comes down all the way around to the down part. This is the time to turn out this blazer to the right side. So the first thing I'm doing is pinning it all over. After pinning the two sides, the two lapel sides, I'll push everything inside and also pin down this hem line of the blazer. This is the same method you use for your full length blazer. The only difference we have here and full length is just the length difference. So I'll take it to the sewing machine now, stitch it all around with my 0.5 inch sewing allowance, and I'll be right back to show you guys what we stitched. Now this is what we have. We finished stitching the hemline and the lapel parts. Everywhere has been closed. For us to open it out, we are going to have to lose out some part of this lining, but we'll leave it that way for now and work on our sleeves. Remember, the hem of our sleeves are still open, so you're going to bring out the sleeves on the wrong side, bring out the lining sleeve and the main fabric sleeve, and then close it on the hem. So I'll be teaching us how to close this hem. You're going to bring it face each other like this, and then make sure it faces each other like it's kissing each other like this. You're going to make sure that the stitch you have on the underarm of both the lining and main fabric is aligned. Then you pin that part down. You also take the second stitch on the other part and pin it down. Then you sew it all around like this. So this is how we're going to be sewing it. The both wrong sides are out, so we're stitching all around it. Don't worry about how we're opening it. After stitching, you're going to see how we'll bring it out to the right side. So in order for you not to be confused, not to mistakenly pin the wrong sleeves together, when you bring out the first side of the sleeve, leave the other one inside so that you don't mistakenly pin the left sleeve to the right sleeve. So we're going to, after pinning down the first one, you take the second one and pin, then we'll take it to the sewing machine and stitch. Now this is what we have. I've stitched these two parts together and then stitched the lining to the main fabric, the lining to the main fabric of the both sleeves together. Now everywhere is closed. It's time to lose some part of your lining. I'm going to lose the center back of my lining. I'm not loosening everything. I'll lose about 5 inches wide where I feel like every other thing can come out from. But before I start bringing it out, I'm going to notch all the edges that I just stitched, especially on the front part. Also, if you want to trim off any excess allowance, you can go ahead and trim it off at this point so that when you flip it to the right side, it doesn't come out bulky or looking too full like there's something inside there. So you're going to trim it out and then put your hand inside this lining that you just opened and then you bring everything out. Start by bringing out the collar part and then the sleeves. Then don't worry about the sleeves. After bringing it out, you're going to now put your hand inside the right side of your sleeve, which is the main fabric side of your sleeve, and then bring out the sleeve from there. Do not bring out your sleeve from the lining, it is wrong. So bring it out from the main fabric, the lining will follow because it has been stitched together. So after bringing it out, this is what you're going to have. You repeat the same thing for the second sleeve as well. Place your hand on the right side, which is the main fabric side, and drag it out. The lining will follow. After doing this, you're going to go ahead and use your iron to press down the hem part of your sleeves. We're done with the sewing of this jacket. The only thing that we're going to be doing now is press. Give it a very good press because the neatness of your job comes out when you iron it very well. So I'm just going to go ahead and iron all of the edges of this blazer, starting from the sleeve down to the collar and to the lapel. You can go into this blazer from that opened part of the lining to push out whichever part is not properly out, right? And then you start pressing it. So I'll speed up this part and iron out all of the part that needs to be ironed for this blazer, and then I'll show you guys the result of what we just made. Remember to subscribe to this channel, guys, and also turn on your notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever we drop a tutorial. Like and share this video because it will be useful to your friends out there. After ironing, this is what we have. Our sleeve is sitting perfectly, the collar is out. The next thing you do is to hand tack this lining that we opened. This is the part where we turned everything out from. So you're going to hand tack it. At this point, before I hand tack, if you want to add a shoulder pad to your blazer, you can still add it at this point because we've not closed this part. So you're just going to hand tack your shoulder pads before you finally close this lining that will open. But I will not be adding a shoulder pad because the shoulder is high enough. This is a tweed fabric, but if you're working with a crepe fabric, it's advisable to add a shoulder pad to give it that shoulder structure. So guys, this is the beautiful jacket that we just made in this tutorial. It's so beautiful, guys. Thank you so much for watching to this point. Thank you for watching, thank you for liking, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Remember, you can request a tutorial by just being a member of this channel, and the request with the highest likes gets posted. Remember, the link to this pant trouser is in the description box, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.